What is up? Welcome into this edition of Pushing the Pile, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. We got a great show for you guys today. I'm Mike Renner, he's Kyle Long, and Leger Douzable joins us on the booth, the three-man booth here today in studio. B-Mac may be back. Brian McFadden, if you're expecting him, he might be back next week. We shall see. Gone this week, though. So we got the O-line, D-line.
He's got a modeling shoot, so we went for toughness.
Go to
we went away from looks. We're just going toughness over here with these two seats.
In the trenches.
Mike's handsome enough for his own right, so we're going to handle the toughness aspect.
So we got some bold predictions here coming up. We're also going to preview the biggest matchups that will decide the biggest games this weekend. But let's start with those bold predictions because we kind of got, a feel for all these teams in week one and where they all stand. But every single year, week one provides some, shall we say, some fool's gold, some things that aren't actually going to be the case going forward. So what are some bold predictions that people may not be expecting here in week two?
So this one, Mike, is really bold, right? Because this team just looked abysmal and awful on offense in week one. And I have the Cleveland Browns bouncing back on the road in week one, getting a win in Jacksonville. Now, again, the tape doesn't bode much confidence for that, Kyle, right? But when you look at Kevin Stefanski, two-time Coach of the Year, right? It was almost like he forgot how to call plays, right? Now, me and Kyle were having a candid conversation. You wonder, is it the lack of confidence in his quarterback? But it's just like certain aspects of the game, right? When it's third and long, you running 5-yard comebacks, like, that's not a high percentage of you getting a first down, right? Like, I just didn't understand the game plan. And then Cleveland's always been known as a running team. Even Jerome Ford, after Chubb got hurt last year, ran the ball really well for them. They could not get the running game going. The offensive tackles struggled because they're backups, but even though they had that scenario happen last year, they still went to the playoffs. So I am going to say that was a one-off just because this team is too good on paper to have that type of performance on offense. I think they play significantly better. And they get a win on the road in Jacksonville. I know it's bold. That's why it's a bold prediction.
So your bold prediction is that the Cleveland Browns bounce back and win a game against Jacksonville. Well, I think it ties in really well with my bold prediction, which is I think Deshaun Watson could be benched before halftime for this Cleveland Browns team. And if that does happen, I could see your bold prediction working out to all your points about the head coach, Kevin Stefanski, the roster, the interior offensive line, the things that the Cleveland Browns are built to do. Dominate the line of scrimmage, win with the tight end over the middle of the field. Get a deep ball every once in a while. You bring a guy like Jameis Winston in the fold, and now Kevin Stefanski can take some more chances. And also, you got to understand, from just a morale standpoint, you wake up in the hotel on Sunday in Jacksonville, and you haven't heard any news about Deshaun Watson being maybe benched for Jameis Winston. I don't feel too great. If I wake up, I hear it's Jameis, I'm hitting the O-line text, and I'm saying, we got a shot today, boys. Let's take this thing, put it on our shoulders, and get the win. But that's not what I see happening. I do not see them winning the football game unless they make a change at the quarterback position.
Well, if Deshaun is benched by halftime, that would mean a half of Jameis Winston, and I do think they have a better shot to win with him. A flat-out do, and I do think that's the biggest thing with the Browns going forward is do they have the gall, to this front office that made this big play with all the picks they gave up, with the contract they gave him that's guaranteed, that they flat-out cannot get out from under with how much money they gave him for the next 2 seasons. He is going to be there regardless. Do you have the cojones to say, Jameis Winston gives us a better chance to win right now? Because flat out, I think he does.
There's going to be a mutiny in that locker room if Deshaun Watson There's going to be a mutiny. They're going to riot. They're going to have the pitchforks and the torches outside of Kevin Stefanski's offense. And they say, guys, why did we work so hard all spring? Why were we there in training camp every single day, bashing each other's heads in at the line of scrimmage? We need to have a chance to win. We have a roster that's good enough to win. The quarterback is the main indicator for success in the National Football League. The quarterback on the screen right there, Deshaun Watson, he has been less than good enough, and I think they need to make a change.
I will say this, though. We always tend to overreact after 1 week. Now, again, it did not look good at all by any measure by Deshaun Watson or the offense, period. It wasn't just him. The whole offense was awful last week. But I would say if it does continue this way, I agree with you. But I would say let's see what it looks like, at least in the first half in this game. I think people tend to jump off the ship way too early in week one.
Yeah, I will say that about what they face. They face a Cowboys defensive line.
Correct.
That's one of the best. We'll get to them later in their matchup with the New Orleans Saints. They are a tough ask for anyone, and they took over that game. Flat out, when you have your both starting tackles out for that game, it was Jedrick Wills, Jack Conklin. Could both be out this week, too, which obviously won't
correct.
bode well against the Jaguars in that bold prediction. But that was a big part of it. But also, Deshaun was not accurate. A lot of things like he did in his prime, he does not do right now, flat out. So it's difficult to see.
Body language too, Mike. Body language is so
It wasn't
big.
good.
You can tell a teammate, if I go to the sideline after a drive, I don't know how my left tackle played, but if I sit next to him, I can tell by the vibe
Correct.
how he played. I don't even have to ask him. Deshaun's vibes are down. He doesn't seem confident at all. That's a problem because that trickles down to all the other position groups. Our leader isn't feeling so
Correct.
hot right now. Well, get a guy in there with Jameis. Maybe you go eat a W down there in Jacksonville.
He's going to get everybody up
He
for
said,
sure.
if you strong, I'm
strong.
So we strong, okay? That's Jameis Winston. He can get you up for a game, give you that morale boost.
I was going to say my bold prediction was going to be, before I saw your guys', it was going to be that Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie for the Jacksonville Jaguars, becomes the first 100-yard receiver in this rookie class. I think he, from what I saw on tape, was ready. He looks like the Jaguars' number one option right now, just from what I saw. And the trust I saw from Trevor Lawrence, ready to rip, and we're willing to give him chances, I saw early on too. So I think in this game, where you're probably going to see a lot of man coverage, he's the guy I'd trust to beat it more than anyone else. So I think he goes off. But my bold prediction will be the Broncos upset the Steelers this weekend. It's the lowest over-under of any game this weekend. They're not expecting a lot of points. Rightfully so, given what we saw from the
low-scoring game.
36.5 points is that over-under. Bo Nix, week one, you got the jitters out. You faced about the toughest defensive coach matchup you'll see
On the road.
in Mike McDonald. So you go on the road to Seattle, the 12th man, all they throw out at you there, they still scored 20 points.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I do think whatever the Steelers have, and they have a great defense as well, it's still going to be a little bit easier. So you still see maybe a little bit more comfortable Bo Nix. And then what I saw from the Steelers offense is just an offense that's not built to put points up on the scoreboard. It's built to control the clock, sure. It's built to keep the game low scoring, but it's not built to put up a ton of points, and especially when you have to go to Mile High early on the season. The altitude, it's one of the biggest home field advantages in the NFL. I think the Broncos get it done.
I know one guy who's not going to be affected by the altitude. That's T.J. Watt. This guy's affected by nothing. He's from Krypton. He just shows up and dominates all the human beings he plays against every Sunday. It's going to be a great opportunity to keep this game low scoring for that defensive front. And obviously for Justin Fields, we want to see an offensive game plan that's tailored towards his strengths. When I watched him in Chicago, the highlights were as high as I've seen, but the lowlights were just as low. Find a way to incorporate the things that Justin Fields does well. Let him get on the edge. He's a freak show in the same light that Anthony Richardson, Josh Allen, these types of guys. He's a physical mismatch. You have to use it to your advantage.
I think the big question with Bo Nix, right? Can he not make those rookie mistakes like he made last week in Seattle? Some of the throws that he shouldn't have made, the one in the red zone, and you have to understand this, and you know this, Mike. As a quarterback, you're already getting 3 right here, right? So you can't take points off the board by making throws that you shouldn't make in the red zone. That one with Julian Love, he was late to it, got the interception, and also the one with Tyreek Woolen, right? Late to the sideline. You can't be late as a quarterback in the NFL, and you'll learn that as a rookie, right? The speed is a lot different than college. Throws you could get away with in college, you cannot do that in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see his maturation, to see what he learned from week 1 to week 2. They always say a team, Kyle, that's the biggest growth is between week 1 and week 2. We'll see what Bo Nix does against that very stingy Steelers defense.
Yeah, he had some of the Auburn decisions.
Correct.
I taped there, right? Let's see if he can get through 17 games and start making some of those Oregon decisions
For sure.
by the end of the season. All right, we're going to get to some of those games. We got Bengals Chiefs coming up in a matchup. We got Falcons Eagles coming up. A little preview right after this. Biggest matchup of the weekend. Cincinnati Bengals travel to Kansas City to face Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, the defending champs, a team that Joe Burrow's fared well against over the course of his career, but obviously not bringing in the same firepower that he's used to. So the matchup I wanted to highlight for this one, how do we think these Bengals wide receiving core, with likely not going to have T. Higgins, still not practicing with that hamstring. We'll see how long that keeps him out. Jamar Chase, though, obviously played last week, probably going to ramp up a little bit more. This upcoming week, they'll need him to. How do we think they fare against these new-look Chiefs DBs?
I mean, these DBs can get after it. And we know that Jarius Sneed is no longer there, but Josh Williams with his length and Jalen Watson, he showed really well in one-on-one coverage last week versus the Ravens with his length that he could knock the ball away. don't even have to speak about Trent McDuffie. This is one of the best young corners in all of football. There's a reason he was voted as an all-pro, right? So be interesting to see what Steve Spagnuolo does. Usually L'Jarius Sneed follow the number one guy. Well, Trent McDuffie followed Jamar Chase. That's the thing I want to see. I think, Mike, besides the receivers, I think a name that we should put in there, Tanner Hudson. For some reason, he just has a real rapport with Joe Burrow right now. Had a real big fumble last week that essentially led to them losing that game. I want to see him, and then will it be Reed covering him, as a safety, or will it be some of their linebackers that are covering him? Tranquil is a guy that has struggled sometimes in coverage with tight ends. Is that a way that Zach Taylor could maybe take advantage of that advantageous matchup as well? So talked about it. We'll see what T. Higgins looks like this week. Will he actually go? Hamstrings are always fickle, but the edge to me, and it's weird to say this because they have so much firepower, the Bengals, when everybody's healthy, but the edge has to go to the secondary of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, the edge to me is for the Chiefs, and here's why. Steve Spagnuolo understands that this offense has a lot of question marks on it in terms of productivity. We know the star power is there for Cincinnati, but to your point, T. Higgins, hamstring, we're probably not going to see him. Jamar Chase, second time we've seen him on the field this season. I mean, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, these are dire straits. This has become a must-win game for you this early in the season. I just think about the mismatch for Chris Jones every single week against any guy that he's facing, and the impact that Chris Jones muddying up the pocket can have on those guys in the secondary. You can take more chances. You know the ball is going to be out a little bit quicker. It's going to have to be out a little bit quicker for Joe Burrow. His health concerns me. He's talked all week about, the wrist isn't bothering me. But there's, when you're doing, I'm serious. When you're doing this stuff, it's not just a maintenance program throughout the course of the football game. Something doesn't feel right in his wrist, and you couple that with the injury to T. Higgins, the lack of success last week against the lowly Patriots, and they've got some confidence issues for this Bengals team. Now you're looking at a group getting off the bus, and all you've heard about is Joe Burrow 3-1 versus Patrick Mahomes. Well, that's all the Chiefs have heard about too.
Oh, man.
So if you think they're going to take it easy on these boys at all, they are not. It's a must-dominate game for Kansas City because this is a legacy conversation for Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. When he looks back in 15, 20 years and there's only a handful of question marks about his career, one of them is going to be, why couldn't you beat Joe Burrow?
Correct.
This is one of those gotta-have-it games for the Kansas City Chiefs. Not only that, they have to dominate this team. Make a statement in the conference that you are the class of the conference. Although the Bengals aren't the number 2 team in the conference right now, they are the bullies that Kansas City has had to deal with. Go knock the bully right in the mouth early.
Yeah, to put some numbers to how badly those Bengals wide receivers struggled against the Patriots secondary. Now, it's a good secondary, one of the best in the NFL, so no real shame in that. But Jamar Chase, 6 catches, 62 yards. The rest of those Bengals wide receivers, 5 catches, 37 yards the entire game.
And to add to that, when Christian Gonzalez was matched up with him one-on-one, only 3 catches for 14 yards. So that's why I said it'll be interesting to see if Steve Spagnuolo takes his number one guy, Trent McDuffie, and put him on there. And then the other thing with the Bengals, where are they at headspace-wise? 2 of their top receivers want deals. They have a defensive end, Trey Hendrickson, who wants a deal. Trent Brown struggled last week at right offensive tackle. Yes, Burrow has owned Mahomes, and you've heard Mahomes in press conference say there's a heightened sense of urgency this week because you talked about it. When he looks back at his legacy, right now, currently, there's only 2 guys that have beat him in the playoffs.
Tom Brady
and Joe Burrow. You don't think he wants a chance to go back and beat Tom Brady in the playoffs?
Yes.
Can't do that. But he can rectify beating Joe Burrow, who has a 3-1 record against him this week. I think the Chiefs win this one going away.
Maybe Tom Brady gets a phone call at some point.
He could. Who knows?
He was reading all the mentions.
Come out the booth?
He was reading about the mentions about his booth performance in week 1. They were trying to bully my boy, the GOAT. We could see Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes play against each other again.
Yeah, I have to agree. This Bengals wide receiving core, if T. Higgins isn't playing, they're just not built.
Yeah.
They ain't built. Maybe you attack Nick Bolton with your tight ends over the middle, like you said, Tanner Hudson, Mike Gesicki. Maybe that's a matchup you can win. But I don't see these wide receivers winning that matchup. All right, the other matchup we wanted to highlight, going up to, I believe it's Monday Night Football. Falcons, Eagles.
Primetime Kirk.
And the link.
That Falcons offensive line.
It's tough.
Who allowed 3 sacks, 1 each from Caleb McGarry, your right tackle, Matthew Bergeron, your left guard, and Drew Dahlman, your center, in week 1, despite Kirk Cousins having one of the fastest time to throws of any quarterback in the NFL, because obviously he wanted to protect himself. But with how quickly they were getting home, there was no protecting him at times, going against this Eagles defensive line that, they didn't quite dominate week 1 against the Packers, but the Packers look like they have a much better offensive line than the Falcons.
For sure.
So this one, we see it getting ugly on Monday
This
night.
is all about what the first 15 dictates for this offense. When I think about the Atlanta Falcons, the issues they had last week, they didn't do the things that they, on paper are going to do really well. That offensive line built to run the football.
Lord.
Kirk Cousins built to run the football and then hit him on deep play action shots, downtown Julie Brown type shots, and they just didn't have that luxury. We're all sitting in here and we all agreed that we didn't think Kirk Cousins looked 100% healthy.
Not at all.
If I'm in that Atlanta Falcons room, I'm going to be standing on the table in that Saturday night meeting saying, we better have 9 runs built in to this first 15.
100%.
I want Jordan Davis to feel me. I want Jalen Carter to feel me. I want Bryce Huff to be blown off the football on the edge of that defense. That's how you can establish the Atlanta Falcons style of offense that Coach Robinson wants to instill in this team. That's how you develop an identity in the National Football League. You run the football in the first 15. Opens up so much more for Kirk Cousins. And do we see him evade any of the pocket stuff? Is he going to go naked boot? Is he going to be able to change the launch point? We don't know yet.
I'm so glad you brought up what the Atlanta Falcons offensive line is built for. To run the pill, right? And Zach Robinson, you come from the Sean McVay tree. Like, where are the double teams up front? Like, lean into the strength of your offensive line. I was so surprised I didn't see that last week versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. You have 2 really good running backs. Like, don't forget, Tyler Algier would start on most teams in the NFL. Run the football. And then in regards to Kirk Cousins, something that surprised me last week, they had him in pistol gun set for most of the game, which if people don't know, that's him in shotgun with the running back directly behind him.
Balance.
That makes you think maybe that, that Achilles isn't all the way there, because Kirk Cousins can get up under the center. He's really good at play action pass. He made a living of it in Minnesota, so we didn't see much of that last week for the Atlanta Falcons. So one comes to mind, and we talked about this yesterday, like, if he's truly not healthy, right? I know you're paying him a ton of money, but even going back to the Browns conversation we have, if Michael Penix Jr. gives you the best opportunity to win right now, like, most coaches have a pulse of the locker room, like you were talking about, and they know that if the players know that this guy isn't healthy, don't put him out there right now because you're hurting the team more than helping the team right now. So that's what I'm looking forward to see. It's hard to play at the Link, especially in prime time.
It is so hard to play.
It's so loud there. It'll be interesting to see those first 15 plays that you talked about. Is Kirk Cousins truly healthy? Will Zach Robinson really instill a run game that benefits and highlights his offensive line?
For example, we saw the Jets go to Santa Clara, and in that first 15, we saw a lot of runs from the New York Jets, but it was obvious that Fred Warner and that defensive front seven was ready to meet that challenge and force them to go elsewhere with their offensive game plan. That's the big question. Are the Eagles able to play bully ball early on and dictate the terms of engagement with this Atlanta Falcons offense?
Yeah, if you cannot play action in this game, you're the Atlanta Falcons. You know you're overmatched. And if you cannot utilize play action, you can't start Kirk Cousins. You can't start Kirk Cousins if he cannot run it. And that was the case week 1. There's a reason why they were the only team in the NFL.
They want Penix in Atlanta?
You have to. Because that linebacker duo in the Eagles, they were so good week 1. But it's because they have an off-ball linebacker who's a former edge rusher who's great coming forward. They have a Nakobe Dean who has one of the shorter wingspans, cannot really cover ground going backwards, but is electric going forwards. You got to attack over the top of these guys. You just have to if you're going to beat this Eagles team. And so if that's not an option in the playbook, you're basically writing your own death certificate.
You're playing with one hand tied behind your back, literally.
So I do not foresee this going well for the Atlanta Falcons if that's the case.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the Eagles probably win this one going away. Again, it all comes down to the health of Kirk Cochains, and then also we know his history of playing in primetime games. Hasn't been good for my guy Kirk, Captain Kirk, so I got the Eagles taking this one.
I really love this Eagles football team. I love what they did on the offensive line this offseason. And, they switched some positions for some guys. Mekhi Becton, who has moved in at right guard. I think the continuity there from last week to this week with the right side of that line is really good. And obviously you got Mailata on the other side, so you can tone down some of those rushers on the blind side of Jalen Hurts. But really, it's going to be the front side of that running game with Lane Johnson and Mekhi Becton. Are they able to hold up on defense with the front against those two guys?
All right, we're going to go from one O-line, D-line matchup to a couple more in the next block. We got Bills traveling down to Miami and the Saints going over to Dallas. We'll preview those right after this. Thursday Night Football, Bills travel to Miami to face the Dolphins here tonight. And In our opinion, the one we wanted to highlight here, the biggest matchup of this game is how is this Bills defensive line, specifically your NFL sack leader currently, Greg Rousseau, going to fare against this kind of new look Miami Dolphins offensive line, but the tackle's still in place. Tron Armstead left tackle, Austin Jackson at right tackle, but Greg Rousseau, what we saw in week 1.
Oof.
I don't care how good those tackles are. He's going to be a handful.
Yeah, I mean, the protection plan, how to get these edge rushers locked down early and often. And for Greg Rousseau, you have to have the understanding that with Tua Tagovailoa and Mike McDaniel, what they're trying to do is get the ball out of Tua's hands quickly. Yep. So you're not going to have 5-step, 7-step timing. You're not going to have the big 7-step drops from Tua. When you do, you got to shoot your shot and unload the cannon on this guy. But at the end of the day, I think about some of the best rushers in the world, guys like J.J. Watt. They know when to shut down the rush and become a lane defender. And with the ball coming right over these offensive tackles' ear holes, right by their ear holes, these defensive end, these edge rusher types are going to have to do a great job getting their hand up. Maybe I'm looking at a tip. I'm looking at forcing an overthrow for Tua, trying to work around that defender. That's where these guys, Rousseau and Miller, can really get after the passer.
Yeah, Kyle, this is where coverage and rush work together, right? Because I think we were just talking about this, Mike. Jacksonville did a really good job last week playing man coverage or two-man, too high safety look, but the corners were playing man across the board. Just throwing that timing off between quarterback and receiver. And this is a timing-based offense, so a lot of times if you're able to get hands on Tyreek or Jalen Waddle at the line of scrimmage, that first read isn't there. That's when Tua will reset and go to the second read. That's when your pass rush can come alive. We saw that from Jacksonville. Travon Walker, we were talking about him on his sack, right? It was because Tua had to go to his second and third read. So it'll be interesting to see what Sean McDermott does, because the Bills are one of the best secondaries in regards to disguising things, right? They'll give you single high safety, but it'll be cover 2. They'll show you cover 3, but it'll be cover 2, right? It'll be interesting to see how they do. Do they play more man, 2-man? Do they go zone? And every time Tyreek or Waddle come within 5 yards, because that's when you can hit the receiver, do they just give him a little bump to throw that timing off to allow Von Miller and Greg Rousseau to get after the quarterback? I know we're talking about Greg Rousseau leading the league in sacks. Von Miller rushed really well last week. People were wondering, would he bounce back? 1 sack. 5 quarterback pressures.
Yeah, 5 quarterback pressures. That's huge. I almost think pressures are more important than sacks, and you call me crazy, but pressures probably happen more often than sacks. So you're affecting the mental of that quarterback. He knows you're in the backfield. I know he's in the backfield. That's a troublesome place to be. I got to ask you a question, though, and I was just thinking about it when you're talking about the disguises on Sean McDermott's defense. Well, obviously nobody undresses a defense better than Mike McDaniel with the pre-snap motions, with moving guys around, finding out is it man or zone, and if it is zone, what kind of zone are we in? So if you're a left end, if you're a rusher over the right tackle, and you have Tyreek across the field in slot, and he comes around pre-snap, are you paying attention to Tyreek at all? Do you think he has any effect on what you're going to do as a rusher, or are you still going to get home?
Well, it's interesting that you put that, because you got to understand, down and distance in the game, right? Also, the game plan, do they give it to him on speed sweeps? Because that's the play where defensive ends can shoot up the field and maybe make a play on Tyreek Hill. Then there's also some defenses will put this in. If Tyreek's in your vicinity, hit him and then add to the rush just to slow off that timing. So
that's the rush and coverage.
Correct, working together. So, like, Tyreek Hill, we know if he's in this yo position, if you can get a hand on him, just hit him, because we know Tua wants to go to him with the ball right away, because he's one of the most explosive guys in all the NFL. So it's all about the defensive plan right now. The interesting thing is it's a short week. We talked about this earlier, Kyle, that the game plan gets condensed because you don't have as many days to put in a game plan. So it'll be interesting, again, what Sean McDermott does. He take away a little bit of the rush. That way, if Tyreek is in the vicinity of the D-line, they get a hand on him and then add to the rush? Or does he disguise really well, and when Tyreek goes 5 yards, a linebacker gets a hand on him? That way it allows Von Miller and Greg Rousseau to get to the quarterback.
He talked about having a short week, and I totally agree with you on a short week. It's an abbreviated game plan, but at the end of the day, this is a divisional opponent. You guys know one another better than anybody. Correct. And one thing that we did as offenses in the National Football League during the spring, actually, the OTAs, is like 3 weeks of practices. The first week, we go against the week 1 opponent regular season. Second week, week 2 opponent. Third week, week 3. And then after that, you're figuring out your game plan as the season goes along. But I do anticipate Mike McDaniel to have been more than prepared for this defense. We're going to see a full arsenal of Mike McDaniel's offense, pre-snap motions, all the stuff we love to see from the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, and the thing about the matchup we highlighted at the beginning, Greg Rousseau versus Austin Jackson, even if Rousseau was beating him like a drum, Tua gets that ball out quick.
He's out
So
quick.
if they don't have the corners to play press,
Correct.
and with Teron Johnson, their slot corner, out for this one already, they may not choose to go up there and really challenge those wide receivers because of how much one play, as we saw even in that Jacksonville Jaguars game, can flip the script on them.
Right.
So they may not have the time to get home. We may see a lot of quick passes to get those Dolphins.
It's going to be the Josh Allen show, though. Let's make no.
I got Miami
mistake
winning this
about
one.
it. Okay.
It's time. It's time.
Gentleman's bet.
Hey, I like that.
All right, another offensive line that they may very well be overmatched this weekend. New Orleans Saints travel to Dallas to face this Dallas defensive line. We all were having questions. How would the Saints offensive line look with new starter at left tackle, new starter at right tackle this year? Well, they gave up only 2 pressures against the Carolina Panthers in week 1. But let's face it, Carolina Panthers defensive line ain't the Cowboys defensive line that we're going to see. So this is the real test. Micah Parsons, 11 pressures a week ago, according to PFF, most of any player in the NFL. He'll be going up against Taliesa Fuaga, the rookie left tackle, and Trevor Penning, the former first-round offensive tackle who flipped from left to the right side this year. Did the Saints' week 1 success give you any hope for them in this matchup?
I think you have to flush that tape. And this is no disrespect to the Carolina Panthers, but like you said, Mike, this is a totally different team they're about to play in regards to the defensive line. That's a well-balanced breakfast the Dallas Cowboys have with Micah Parsons. 11 pressures in the game is astronomical. It's ridiculous. And Mike Zimmer, a job week 1 in regards to that double A gap mug with the linebackers. And you can speak to this, Kyle, what that does to the protection. And
My eyes.
what that does to the protection and how he uses Micah Parsons and moves him around, not only on the outside, but also to get that athletic ability inside on the guards. Trevor Penning, that was the big question mark going into this season for them at right tackle. Really struggled last year in some spot start duty. Really struggles with speed to power. It'll be interesting to see, do they put DeMarcus Lawrence on him or do
Speed to power, you say.
or do they put Micah Parsons on him as well? So I think last week for the Saints, it builds your confidence up, but this will be a true test versus one of the best defensive lines and one of the best defensive minds in regards to Mike Zimmer and setting up those one-on-one matchups.
I've played against some of these units where they have an absolute world beater like a Micah Parsons type out there, and then there's the other guy that rotates in for him, and he's not the same body type, but sometimes it's the second guy who gives you more trouble because you, like Trevor Penning, he's going to prepare all week for Micah Parsons. I'm sure he knows exactly what he's going to do, snap in, snap out, but the real hard thing is stopping it. If you do stop it, you feel great about it. He goes and gets his breath. Some guy you don't know his name comes out, hits you with a 2-hand spin. So Trevor Penning, you got to be on your P's and Q's all the time. Can't be asleep at the wheel. Also, you're going to Dallas. There's going to be crowd noise. This is something you didn't have to deal with at home in New Orleans last week. It's a brand new ball game when you take it on the road.
Yeah, similar thing to what we said about the Atlanta Falcons earlier. They're going to have to run the football. The New Orleans Saints are. They're going to. That's was their bread and butter. And guys like Trevor Penning and Taliesa Fuaga, that's kind of what they do as well. If they have any strengths, it is their ability to move people in the running game. But the thing that really didn't get talked about a lot from this Cowboys Week 1 win, they stopped the run against the Cleveland Browns. So probably the Achilles heel of that defense last year was their ability to get gashed. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they have the horses to get it done now.
I mean, I think they did a really good job in the offseason. One, getting DeMarion Overshown, who I was a huge fan of, getting him back healthy. His speed just pops out on tape. And then Eric Kendricks, remember, he was set to sign somewhere else. And Zimmer's like, hey, come play for me again.
The ball just finds him.
And, oh, my God, he was a warhorse in the run game last week. So that was a really good point that you made because if you're the Saints, you want to run the ball and stay in second and third and manageable. The last thing you want to do with the Avengers on defensive line is be in third and long because Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence will make it a long day for you. And Diggy Zua played really well against the pass and the run last week. So I think Mozzie Smith has got his weight back and he's playing really good against the run as well. So if you're the Saints, you got to stay out of third and long or it's going to be a long day for Derek Carr.
They're definitely going to be throwing the football because we know this Dak Prescott-led Cowboys offense is going to put points on the board. They didn't do very well in terms of production in the passing game last week, under 200 yards for Dak Prescott. Yeah. But that combination of CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, you can almost set your watch to it. These guys are going to ball out. It's going to be 2+ touchdowns every single time they're out. And they're at Jerry's World. I just think it's too much for the Saints team right now.
Yeah, I do think this Cowboys defensive line they just throw so much at you. Yeah. And we've been harping on the tackles, but it's not as if the Saints interior has like the horses to really stand up to.
Watch out for spinner looks. He talked about the AA stuff. So spinner looks means that edge rusher could be Micah Parsons. He gets off the ball and he goes over the A gap and he pretends to come down and he pretends, and then my butt gets a little tight and then he goes back. You never know where they're going to come from. It's the spinner looks. It's the known rusher looks. So in addition to having to set the proper way against those type of looks, you have to communicate with one another.
100%.
What's really tough to do when you're on the road? Communicate. And no better group to communicate against than the Dallas Cowboys defensive line.
Now we're going to move from the trenches to a little bit of wide receiver DB, a little bit of air it out as we're going to preview the Texans wide receivers against the Bears corners after this. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson turned in a meh performance week one on the ground. Was not quite what we had hoped in the fireworks when they signed the all-pro running back. But he's going up against a defense that just gave up 176 yards on the ground last week in the Las Vegas Raiders. What do we see from this Baltimore Ravens? What do we see week one from this running game, and what do we expect here going forward?
Yeah, I was a little surprised by Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator, and the way he used Derrick Henry. It was just too predictable. You got in big, heavy sets. Like, Chiefs knew you were running the football. Like, run Derrick Henry out of 11 in the shotgun, in the pistol set, where teams can't key in on him. Like, that was the whole reason you went to get him, right? You got to be inventive in the run game. And Mike and Kyle, there's already question marks with this offensive line, right? Three new starters. Chris Jones had his ways at spurts in that game. Let's not forget the Raiders do have Christian Wilkins and Mad Max Crosby, right? So they have to get that communication down. It was literally like Lamar Jackson saying, I'll do it myself last week, right? They can't continue to do that and have success in the NFL. So King Henry needs to get going early, but I'm calling out offensive coordinator Todd Monken. You got to be inventive in how you use the King.
Be inventive and take a look at your film from last time that this team played. When the Kansas City Chiefs hosted the Baltimore Ravens, they were dominant up front against this Ravens team in the pass protection unit. In that phase of football, it's one of the toughest as an offensive lineman. When you're going against these Pro Bowlers, all-pro players, you're never in the advantage. Well, I'll tell you where you are in the advantage. You've got a guy named Derrick Henry. You know the snap count. You know which direction the ball is going. Let's take the fight to the Las Vegas Raiders, run the football. They gave up a lot of running yards last week. How do you cover up some pass protection woes? You run the football. Double teams, get some help, get that wave rolling off the line of scrimmage. And to your point, I want to see more Derrick Henry. Yeah. I want to see this become an attitude game for the Baltimore Ravens. Go run him. I need him to have at least 22 touches. I need 22 touches from Derrick Henry, and you're floating by in this game with an easy dub.
To me, the interesting thing about Henry and his usage is going from the Titans running game that if you go all the way back to, when Derrick Henry kind of first became Derrick Henry, which was year 3 in Tennessee, when they really transitioned over to outside zone heavy scheme.
Yeah.
He is one of the best, if not the best, outside zone runner in modern NFL history in terms of just when he gets that head of speed, he is difficult to go after. So it's almost counterintuitive that a 247-pound running back isn't your push him between the tackles guy.
Correct.
He's just too high cut. Linebackers chop him down there. He needs that space to get that stiff arm going, and that's when he really cooks. So they didn't run a lot of it. Week one. Do we see more outside zone stretch game with Derrick Henry now?
I'm so glad you brought that up because by nature, they're a G-scheme team, right? They like to pull the guards, right? Power plays, counter plays. Like, they are a physical team. That's what the Ravens do. So a lot of people wondered how this marriage would work because, to your point, you would think Derrick Henry would thrive in that because he's so big. But no, he's a guy he's a one-cut, get-downhill guy. And once he gets into the secondary, Kyle, he's hard to stop, right? So it'll be interesting. That's why I said, Mike, out of 11 personnel, for people that don't know what that means, right? 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers, you're going to spread the defense apart. Run that zone scheme with him in there, right? Even if it's offset or even out of the pistol, that way they can't gauge which side he's going. I think they'll have a lot of success if they do that. But it's going to come down to offense coordinator Todd Monken really spicing things up and not being so predictable when King Henry's in the backfield.
Yes, the gun runs are great. I mean, the gun runs are great because it keeps the linebackers honest. And to your point, Derrick Henry running outside the tackles. When you're in the gun, you have to stay a little bit honest. When you're under center, these guys run straight downhill. So you're going to get that opportunity for the Ravens to dictate the style of fighting for Derrick Henry and all the things you guys have said. His ability to go outside, make one cut. A lot of people hear outside zone and they think, well, he just runs around defenses?
No.
He presses the defenses. Linebackers run over top. He puts his foot in the ground, goes
Correct.
vertical. Next thing you know, you make a guy miss, you can hit your head on the goalpost.
Yeah, Derrick Henry running downhill while they're all running laterally.
Yes.
Recipe for
It's almost
success.
like speed to power.
No question. I like that.
Especially against these Raiders linebackers. Robert Spillane, 229 pounds. Divine Diablo, 223 pounds.
Spillane's been awesome, though.
Yeah,
Robert Spillane is a Raider.
He wakes up ready for the contact. For
He
sure.
takes his eye patch off when he gets off his pirate ship in the morning.
I don't care how tough you are, though. When you're giving up 20 pounds to a guy, sometimes the bigger guy wins. All right, the other matchup we wanted to preview here. Texans wide receivers, one of the best units in the NFL, going up against this Bears cornerback duo of Tyreek Stevenson, Jalen Johnson. Both had a pick in week 1. Yeah. This is a heavyweight knockout duo. How do we see this one shaking out?
This is
You forgot one guy. Kyler Gordon is a dog in the slot, man. So, like, when you look at this matchup, everybody wondered for the Texans, like, that was a question mark. How will they spread the ball around, right? There's too many mouths to feed. I think CJ even alluded to that in his post-game press conference, saying, like, well, how did it look, guys? We're able to get everybody the ball. Nico Collins goes
Everybody
over 100.
happy?
Nico Collins goes over 100. Stephon Diggs gets 2 touchdowns. Tank Dell gets 40 yards. Even Dalton Schultz got involved. So it'll be real interesting to see this Bears secondary that a lot of people don't give enough respect to. I mean, Tyreek Stevenson, one of the best young corners. Jalen Johnson, I thought it was criminal that he wasn't voted a top 100 player.
Yep.
Like, this dude is a baller. Close out, pick 6 to end the game versus the Tennessee Titans. And Kyler Gordon, not only what he does in regards to being their slot corner, but he's essentially, and you know this, Kyle, in 11 personnel, he's an extra linebacker. He is tough. He comes downhill in the run game and support. So you got to think about it. The Texans have 3 good receivers. The Bears have 3 good corners. Something is going to have to give. So I cannot wait to see this matchup and to see what Mr. Matt Eberflus does in regards to coverage scheme. Does he go more zone? Does he match with man? I can't wait to see this matchup.
I think that this defensive unit understands that they're going to have to make a takeaway in order to keep their young rookie quarterback in the game with C.J. Stroud. I will keep that in mind if I'm Bobby Slowick and C.J. Stroud. I'm looking to maybe get some double moves. I know Jalen Johnson is one of the most physically gifted, savvy players, but along with that comes chances taken that can bite you. So look for some double moves. Look for that defense. You got to be on your fundamentals, on your P's and Q's, because this guy, C.J. Stroud, he can show you one thing and give you another really easily. To your point about the receiving core and how they can all do different things. I love how they're going to lean on Stephon Diggs in the red area. He's such a threat in the red area to be able to get open. His stems are great. He can release still like the Stephon Diggs of old, and he just understands spacing. So he's going to be the best friend in the red area. The other guys are the problems in the open field. So keep your eyes on the Nicos, keep your eyes on the Tanks, and you'll be just okay. But it's going to come down to that quarterback, slowing him down, get a turnover.
Yeah, we've been talking about a lot of mismatches. This one, I don't know who to give the edge to, truthfully.
Man, it's hard.
One of the probably top 5 receiving unit in the NFL, probably top 5 secondary in the NFL. But what I worry about from the Bears, 213 yards. That's how many yards the Texans ran for in week 1. I think that's where they're going to challenge this Bears defense, trying to run right up the gut at that defensive line that's just a little bit underpowered compared to that secondary.
Yeah, but the Bears are synonymous with good run defense. They were the number 1 run defense in all of football last year. And Tony Pollard had some runs in the first half, but they totally shut him down the second half. I mean, Dexter is a house inside, so he played really well last week. I actually like that matchup in regards to Joe Mixon, who had a crazy debut for the Houston Texans as far as running the football versus this Bears defensive line, and those 2 linebackers that are very active for
T.J. Edwards had 48 tackles.
And Edmonds, who is a freak of nature at 6'5", like 240 pounds. He's literally like the Terminator out there as well. So, like, I actually like that matchup in regards to Joe Mixon and that run game versus Chicago Bears defense. I'm like you, Mike. I don't know who to give the edge to. You would have to say the quarterback is the difference in this game, right, with C.J. Stroud and Caleb Williams. And at home, I'd give the Texans the edge.
Yeah, because when you watched Stroud a week ago, it didn't matter sometimes by guys who perfectly covered. He was putting it there, right? Like, you can do all you want.
He's unworldly.
He's as accurate as it gets throughout the NFL. All right, we have Thursday night football on tap. We're going to full preview here of the Bills and Dolphins. I know we went a little matchup earlier. We want to talk who we think is going to win, what we think some over-unders are going to be, right after this. The Bills-Dolphins rivalry has been a little lopsided of late. Tua is 1-6 against Josh Allen now in his career. The Bills seem to have the Dolphins' number, but it's a hot one here in Miami. It's always hot. It's nighttime. It's always hot, though, here. It's still going to be above 80. And when the temperature is above 75, Mike McDaniel.
There it is.
13-4 against the spread.
It's going to be 82.
16-1 straight up.
Woo!
It's going to be hot. It always is down here. What do we like?
Well, I like the under first and foremost in this game. We talked about this earlier, Kyle. Short week, condensed game plan, right? Travel for the away team. Your body's still acclimating to an NFL season. A lot of guys banged up in this game as well, so you wonder how that hurts the execution of the game. And when you look at it in totality, the Bills in their last 6 Thursday night games, the under is hit for them. In the last 14 Thursday night games for the Miami Dolphins, right, out of the 14 games, 11 of those games, the under is hit as well. So I like the under, but I know Josh Allen has owned the Miami Dolphins, and I know Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa and Tyreek Hill have all talked about, like, if we want to get, a home playoff game, we got to deal with these guys. I think tonight's the night. I think tonight.
Destiny.
Great stat by my guy Mike, right? It's the same stat I had down too. Mike McDaniel doesn't lose when it's above 75 degrees. 16-1. I like the Miami Dolphins to get it done in a close game. Matter of fact, give me the -2.5. They will cover it.
Oh, my goodness. Josh Allen, the only player in NFL history to average 270-plus passing yards and 50-plus rushing yards against one team. That team, the Miami Dolphins. This guy with the C on his chest, number 17, Josh Allen. He is an absolute avatar out there, okay? He's riding dinosaurs. He's jumping through trees. He's just a bit different than you and me, Leger. And I think that when the time comes that this Buffalo Bills team needs a big play, it's going to be no secret. It's going to be Josh Allen with the football. He had an MVP-style game last week and a comeback win against the Buffalo Bills. I love everything about Josh Allen. He's the type of dude that you block a little extra for. He's the type of guy that you go and you wrestle him out of the pile if somebody's on Josh Allen. He's the guy you want to fight for. And I love this Bills offensive line. And when I think about the way that the Miami Dolphins can try to win, get Josh off his spot with a guy like Jalen Phillips, Spencer Brown, really good player, Deion Dawkins, great player as well. The Bills are dialed in. I got the Bills tonight.
I can't decide versus Dolphins and Bills. But the one bet I like is the over. You said the under at 48.5.
Wow, you like the
I'll
over.
give the over.
I'll go over as well.
Because
Really?
I think without Teron Johnson, the Bills are just going to be scrambling to try to shut down this Miami Dolphins offense. When you don't have the corners, the way the Jaguars did to go reel in and punch them in the mouth, these wide receivers, these like smaller but faster wide receivers, when you can't throw that timing off, and I don't think they have the guys to do so in Buffalo now, if Teron Johnson is out, I think that's going to be, they're going to run wild. But then on the other side, Josh Allen, you're not going to stop him, and especially now with the offensive line he has in front of him, in my opinion, the best offensive line he's had in his career, going against this kind of new look Dolphins front seven that kind of got gashed at times against the Jaguars in the run game.
Yeah.
I think they have whatever they want offensively, this Bills team, so it's just points come up on the scoreboard.
It's something to consider, too. Jordan Poyer, who was with the Bills for many years, is now with the Miami Dolphins. Does that give them a little edge in regards to knowing what Joe Brady likes to do, certain checks? So if you're Josh Allen, and we already talked about it, short week, do you have enough time on the offensive line to change some of those checks or even some of those checks to the receiver that Jordan Poyer maybe knows? We'll see if that benefits the Miami Dolphins. And then Anthony Weaver, I would like to see him be a lot more exotic this week. I didn't see it as much in Jacksonville like I thought I would, right, coming from that Mike McDonald tree. Let's see if he switches things up. And then who's going to spy Josh Allen in the red zone? Javon Holland, David Long, one of those guys going to have a lot of responsibility in the red zone.
I know the run game coordinator and offensive line coach Aaron Kromer, the point of emphasis he puts on his team every week is they don't think you can block up nickel runs. So I think that for the Buffalo Bills, we're going to see two tight ends often, but sometimes we're going to see them spread this thing out, challenge, and it's going to be really the Miami Dolphins daring the Buffalo Bills to run the ball in nickel runs. Obviously, the threat is Josh Allen. He's got a ton of receivers he can throw to now. No guys over 5 targets last week. I think we could see this running game take precedent early in the football game.
I got Bills. Kyle's got Bills. Leger's got Dolphins.
Over, under.
We'll see who's right, and we'll recap all the games next Monday, 9:30 a.m., pushing the pile. Mike Renner, Kyle Long, and Leger joins us every Wednesday as well, sometimes on this Thursday 1 p.m. show. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you then.
Stretch before you jump on tables.